Welcome to the Retirement Planning Show, your source for financial strategies to help you retire with confidence. Featuring Chip Coughlin of Retirement Income Analysts in Syracuse, New York. Chip is a registered representative, and securities are offered through LPL Financial, member of FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Stratus Wealth Partners Ltd. Retirement Income Analysts and Stratus Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. And now, here are your co-hosts, Matt Halloran and Chip Coughlin.
Hello and welcome to episode number 16. Today, Chip Coughlin is going to talk about the 10 surprising facts about retirement. All right, Chip. Well, we all love surprises, so tell us a little bit about what this is about.
Well, you know, Matt, this was an article by Emily Brandon from U.S. News and World Report. I saw it. I said, now, this is kind of interesting. I'd like to send this out to my clients so that they can get a handle on this, because no one likes surprises in this type of a sense. And you would think most retirees are prepared for more free time and less stress, but there's other aspects of retirement that are unexpected that can lead to stress. And many retirees have significant financial worries and health concerns, and an excess of free time is only fun if you use it well. So she put together these 10 retirement issues that people might find surprising.
All right. Number one was surprising, really surprising to me, and her rationale behind it was even more surprising, that it can be difficult to spend down your savings. What was her thoughts on this, and what are your thoughts?
Well, her thoughts were, after decades of accumulating enough money to retire, it can be psychologically and emotionally challenging to spend down the money and watch your nest egg get smaller every year. And I agree with that. Clients work so hard to set aside money for retirement over quite a period of time, and then they become really guarded about spending those dollars and not overspending. And while I agree that everybody, even in retirement, should have a budget, and it's a budget and a plan that they've worked out even before they've retired, they've got to have that budget. But if you start to be a real miser with those dollars, then the retirement of your dreams is almost out of reach. And it's out of reach, you know, psychologically, because you're not willing to spend money on everything. And it's almost a mental problem where you just are looking at scarcity. Yeah. I won't have enough. I won't have enough. And many of our clients ask, will I be okay? And many times I say, yes, you're going to be okay. We have spending parameters. You've got to stick to these. And these are going to be reviewed on an ongoing basis. So I think, and that's one of the big points here, is you have to get back with your financial advisor on an ongoing basis, not only to reassure yourself that you're doing well, but to also take a look at what the future holds, how the market's responding, and how those two things will impact how you're spending money today.
Well, and that really leads us right to number two, which is that you'll still need investment growth, right?
Well, that's exactly it. And a lot of people forget that. They think when they get to retirement, they're just going to lock it down, have no risk, and just draw an income from it. But it's really tough, because saving enough for retirement, you know, is not your final financial goal. Your goal is to make my money last, to make their money last, and also to have, you know, a meaningful retirement. And so we tell our clients that we need to get returns in excess of inflation, okay, so that their purchasing power does not decline while they're retired. And, you know, we want to minimize the risk in a portfolio for sure, but you still need some equities to get those returns in excess of inflation. Because when you factor in inflation and taxes, it's going to eat into your spending power a little bit, right, or your income, your monthly income. So we've got to have some growth. So the magic number is 4%. And many times they say if you spend 4% of your income, you have about a 92% success rate, meaning your money will last as long as you do 92% of the time. So many times we look at a spend down rate of between 3 and 4% for that extra cushion. But again, it starts with a budget. It starts with a well-allocated portfolio, and it starts with it starts with a review and constant reviews and updates along the way, so that you're informed. Because over time, we find with some of our clients that are already retired that they lose track of what's going on and they start to become fearful. Fearful they're going to run out of money. Fearful that their health insurance is not going to be there for them. Fearful in a number of ways. That's no way to live in retirement. So we want them to be aware and know what's going on so that they can take full advantage of the retirement and live confidently.
You had talked about making sure that something was going to be there in retirement. You use Social Security numbers now to still do, long-term financial projections, and many retirees are going to rely on that Social Security, correct?
Well, as you know, about 86% of Americans get Social Security. So that's almost all of us, and that's going to become part of your income. It's part of the plan. It's there. It's not going away. Once it starts, it's not going to go down. You'll get cost of living increases on that Social Security over time. But 65% of retirees, their Social Security makes up about half of their retirement income. And 90% of retirement income, let me rephrase that, it's 90% of some retirees' income, and that's about 36%. So while Social Security is important, we have to save, because the standard of living you can get from just Social Security is very low. And I will tell you, and this goes back to 2014, the average monthly retirement benefit from Social Security in 2014 was $1,282. So we really have to take time to plan so that in addition to Social Security, you've got a pretty good income from outside sources.
Medical expenses are one of the largest concerns that we've seen in a lot of different surveys. Let's talk about Medicare.
Okay. Well, as we know, you're going to click into Medicare when you hit 65 years old. And high medical bills don't go away once you qualify for Medicare. Although Medicare covers a large amount of the medical treatments older people need, there's several popular services that it doesn't cover. For instance, Medicare won't cover routine eye exams. They won't cover eyeglasses. They don't cover dental care or hearing aids. And those can be very costly. I was in an office today that had an audiologist, and we were talking about hearing aids. And hearing aids can be very, very expensive. And let's face it, we need to hear what's going on around us. So I talked to him about hearing tests and how often and things like that. And he said hearing does seem to decline over time. It's a function of the noise you've had in your life, along the way. And everybody needs to hear for a number of reasons. So let me go on one more idea. Medicare only covers 100 days in a nursing home. It doesn't cover forever in a nursing home. Mm-hmm. So retirees who require additional long-term care will have to find another way to pay for it. So Medicare is out there. It's a safety net. We're all going to get at 65, but many times it's not enough. It's the base of the coverage, but it's not the upside. Many times the clients will need to supplement that with some type of Medicare program, Medicare gap coverage, and things like that, so that they're not bombarded with medical bills that they didn't expect.
What retirees do with their time is another huge component that I know you help your clients with, because you have a deep conversation about that. So the next one here is that you might spend a lot of time alone. How does that actually, how is that a surprising fact about retirement?
Well, think about it. Without a job to go to every day, you could find yourself spending an increasing amount of time alone or at home with your spouse. Some 44% of Americans age 65 or older live alone, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So unless you sign up to volunteer or make an effort to socialize on a regular basis, you could become bored and lonely. We talk to our clients specifically that they should have a social circle, and they should have so many interactions with that social circle per week, because that's necessary to have a meaningful and healthy retirement. So we talk to them about what are the options. Could they volunteer? Could they work part-time? What are they doing socially? Are they in different clubs or organizations? What can they do to have a social setting that is also giving them back something, something that they enjoy doing, something like that. So you have to have that plan. And I tell everybody, and I'll repeat it here again, you have to do this kind of thought before you retire. You've got to get it into it before you retire so you have a plan when you retire. And we had a client that was an attorney, and he lives west of Syracuse, where I am, and he worked very hard. He'd go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and come home at 8 o'clock at night. And he did that for 40 years. And when he retired, he didn't know what to do. He just sat on the couch. And his wife called me and she said, Chip, what can we do with him? Can you find him something to do? And I said, well, he's decompressing from 40 years of working, almost 12 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. But we have to find him something to do. He's got to join a group. He's got to work part-time. He's got to have social interaction other than his wife to keep his mind healthy and his body healthy.
Well, speaking of mind healthy and body healthy, a lot of spouses outlive their significant other, and so a lot of them find themselves single again. So what happens with that? Well,
if you outlive your spouse or perhaps you're divorced, you might find yourself single again in retirement. While just over half, about 55% of Americans age 65 and older are married, the rest are widowed, divorced, or separated, or never married. And some of these single seniors will begin meeting new people, and they'll start the dating process. And there's a variety of online dating services that cater specifically to people over age 50. But again, I think it has to do with having the social circle, having the interaction, and you're looking for companionship. We had some clients in the other day, and I asked how they met, and they married very recently. I asked how they met. They met online, and they had some common interests in different winter sports and some summer sports and things like that, and they were very compatible. But I said, what was going on before that? And they both said, almost in unison, we were very lonely. And they found each other, and it was so uplifting, and it gave meaning to their life. So when we see our clients, we're asking them what they're doing. Are they open to this? We want them to be available for this if possible, but we can't force them, of course, into it.
Sure.
But being single again and designing your life and your lifestyle, I think, are very important, but it has to revolve around interactions, social circles, and things like that.
Many retirees move, and I know that you have had many retirees, many people that you've helped retire, the hundreds and hundreds of people that have retired with you do move, and they move generally to someplace warmer. They either moved, a lot of times it seems, to Florida or Arizona. That's a huge thing to consider because, one, moving is difficult, but it's also expensive. Let's talk about that.
Okay, we get a lot of clients, and recently we had a client wanted us to do some research on the best places to move to. So my staff put together a list of different cities to move to and why. And it's very interesting. There's a lot of people that show the desire to move, but I think in a minute we'll talk about the statistics of people that do move. In New York, and I'm in Syracuse, New York, New York is one of the highest tax states out there. Think New York, Maryland, and places like that. So people initially are looking to get better weather because Syracuse is a little rough in the winter. They're looking to get to a state that perhaps doesn't have a state income tax. They're looking for different things. Many times we see grandparents travel to the grandchildren and relocate there, wherever that may be. But many clients are looking to get warmer weather. But as attractive as it sounds, let's talk about moving to the Sun Belt. Most retirees don't relocate for retirement. Only a small percentage of Americans age 65 and older have moved to a new residence between 2009 and 2013, and they tracked it in that period of time. And the people who do move often relocate to the same state or even the same county they found. The the Census Bureau found that out. Only 1% of retirees moved to a new state, and just 0.3% went overseas. Relocating to a new community in retirement often means leaving behind family, Matt, and leaving behind a support system that can be difficult to rebuild in a new place. So while we have many clients that have done so, we had a client in last week that told me when he's going to retire. He had a date, and he was going to move down to Virginia. He found a beautiful town in Virginia that really suited his needs. The weather was very moderate, and he's exploring right now the options of building or buying a house. But we have those discussions all the time. But that's, as you know from the statistics I just cited, that's many times out of the norm.
Wow.
So while many people desire to move, most people don't. And I know even in central New York where we are, some people want to move out of the county we're in because it's got a little bit higher tax and move to a more rural location to lower their income tax. But there's many reasons why people look to move. I think the tax planning issue, moving to a state without a state income tax like Florida, is very appealing. North Carolina, no state income tax. But when they do that, maybe they're venturing off into new territory. And again, that could add to the loneliness or the isolation if they get to an area where they don't know anybody. So we see in our client base, we see clients that do that, but we also see grandparents that move to the grandchildren. And wishing to be part of their lives and downsizing their homes, of course. When you get a smaller house, you pay less taxes. And in New York State, the property taxes are pretty high. So if they're moving to Maine or Massachusetts or North Carolina to be near the grandchildren, many times that's a great move. But it's a difficult move. Let me tell you one surprising fact. We have a number of clients that have designed their retirement so that they can buy an RV and travel around the country for a period of years while they're still healthy. And I find that to be exceptionally brave and courageous. And they've got a very detailed plan of where they're going to go, when they're going to go, what they're going to do, and things like that. And I think that's just amazing. I think it's great.
Well, you're talking about how they want to be helping their grandkids, but they also need to remember that they're going to need help too, right? Which is number 8. Well,
exactly. Number 8 is you'll need help from others. And while aging is an expected part of retirement, the loss of independence typically isn't as welcome. And I know with my mother used to spend, after my father passed away, my mom would still go to Florida. She was still very independent. She'd spend the winter in Florida, and I'd either drive her car down or ship it down to her. So that was great. But then she got to the point where she didn't feel comfortable being that far away from family. And it was like she was losing her independence a little bit. So she has decided to stay home. This is the third winter that she hasn't gone to Florida. And, there's going to come a time when you can't drive. You can't shovel your own sidewalk if you're in central New York. And you can't climb a ladder if you want to change a light bulb. So you're very dependent. And we've said this to our clients. When you're a young person, you're dependent upon your parents. When you get to be my age, your parents become dependent upon you. And it's that juxtaposition that really causes some stress. And while the beginning of retirement is often full of fun and adventure and promise, it's also a good time to make some contingency plans for later down the road when you might not be able to care for yourself. So again, it's a planning concern. Where will you be? How will you live? Who will help you? And things like that, so that you're not left out in the cold. Because I know with my mom, she's 89, she still lives in the family house. If there's a light bulb out, I don't want her changing that light bulb. I told her that. I in fact took the stepladder out of her garage, so she wouldn't look at it and say, "I can do this." And didn't she call me up 2 years ago? So she's 87 years old. She wondered where the ladder was because she was going to go out and clean her gutters.
Wow.
And I said, "Mom, the ladder's at my house for a good reason. I don't want you to do that."
Yeah.
And I went over and did it for her. But she saw herself as still very independent. But, that's very dangerous. And I didn't want her doing it. So while they may still feel independent, I think the big hurdle with my mother especially was when her doctor told her that she probably shouldn't drive anymore.
Yeah.
And she's a nice girl and she doesn't want to offend anybody. And she nodded her head like she agreed. And I took her to the doctor that day. So we get out to the car and I start the car and I said, what do you think about that? And she looked me right in the eye and she said, there's no way he's telling me I can't drive. And I said, wow, she's got some resolve. So she drove about another month and a half and then it was time to give up the car. And she felt somewhat helpless. So in the planning I had done for my mom, we had a budget that set aside money on an ongoing basis so that we could have somebody come into the house and take her out 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we have a gal that comes to the house and we have a little itinerary of different things we'd like her to do. And they go and do it for 3 or 4 hours, 3 times a week. So she still gets out of the house. She still gets to go shopping. She still gets to go to lunch and things like that. Well, but where that comes from, though, Matt, is you have to plan for it. So it's not a shock to your budget.
Well, but you're still talking 4 days a week in your mother's situation where she's in the home, which leads us to number 9. What's number 9?
Okay, number 9 is kind of interesting. Retirees watch a lot of TV. All right. Now, I know, my mom is my number one retiree, and I know that sometimes she's watching the TV. Sometimes the TV is just background noise. She likes to knit. She likes to read and things like that. But statistically, most retirees spend over half their leisure time watching TV. And this came from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Seniors 65 to 74 tune in for about 3.9 hours on weekdays. And those 75 or older watch TV for an average of 4 hours each day. And this was a 2013 American Time Use Survey by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. When my parents were in Florida and I'd go to visit them, my dad would read. He was a great reader, but he always had on one of 2 channels, the Golf Channel or the Weather Channel. And I think he was in Florida. He wanted to see what the weather was like in New York all winter, just see how bad it was and how he wasn't missing it. But the TV was on all the time. And TV is great if you have an interest, a movie or a sporting event or something like this. But that's tough. It's tough. I can tell you, man, I got hurt. I had a big accident about 17 years ago, and I had to stay home from work for a period of time. They wanted me to stay home for a month. And about 8 days into it, I couldn't take it any longer. I'd read everything there was to read in the house. I'd watched Sports Center to the point where I could have been one of the announcers on Sports Center. I just had, even though I felt lousy, I had to go back to work. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And so TV is entertaining to a point, but it's also mind-numbing to a point.
Well, and if they don't have the stimulus like you were talking about with your mother, too, we've also found out that, and that's not part of this article, but we have found out that they don't live as long. But let's talk about the last one. Actually, before we get to number 10 here, why don't you go back through the first 9, and then let's go ahead and wrap up the podcast with number 10 today.
All right. Well, number 1 is it can be difficult to spend down your savings because you've grown that money and you're proud of it and you don't want to give it away. So you want to hold on to it. You're husbanding that resource and they don't want to give it away. Number 2 is you still need investment growth. And I would tell you need real returns in excess of inflation, okay, to keep your portfolio chugging along. Most people rely on Social Security a little too heavily. That's number 3. Number 4, it talks about Medicare and it doesn't cover everything. And I want to broadcast that loud and clear. Medicare does not cover everything. So you've got to do some planning there. Number 5, you might spend a lot of time alone, okay? And you're used to being around people in your job, and all of a sudden you're home. And I know when my dad retired, he didn't know what to do. He was walking the dog, and my mom said, Chip, find him something to do. And he went back to work. He retired once. He went back to work. He didn't like it. Number 6, many retirees are dating, and that's a function of living alone and being back in the dating game. Number 7 is very interesting. Moving can be difficult. While many of our clients anticipating retirement desire to move, the studies would show that they don't move too far and they don't move often. Number 8, you'll need help from others. That's talking about the aging process. It's talking about losing your independence and being dependent on other people, not only for rides to different places, but it could be cooking, it could be to run errands with you, it could be doing minor repairs around the house. Losing independence can be very psychologically damaging. So again, we've got a plan for that. We have to have a system. Who's going to be there so you can feel confident that when this does happen, and it typically does happen, you won't be a burden to somebody because you planned on it already. And number 9, retirees watch a lot of TV. So let's talk about number 10.
Yeah, number 10. Let's do it.
Number 10 is you don't need to hurry. And this is a great way to close this out because compared to the overall population, retirees ages 65 to 74 spend extra time lingering over meals. They're working on home improvement or garden projects, and they shop. And that was found from the American Time Use Survey by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Retirees also spend time reading, relaxing, and volunteering, more so than their younger age counterparts. And while the 10 facts may be surprising, many could really be expected if you spent some time on it. To live a long, fulfilling retirement, you need to have a plan, you need to stay active, you need to exercise, you have to have a social circle, eat well, and stay involved. Most importantly, you need to have a plan prior to retirement that talks about these issues. In the absence of planning, your retirement could be an emotional and financial struggle.
Chip, thank you very much for this episode number 16, the 10 surprising facts about retirement.
Thank you, Matt.
And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you take a moment to subscribe so that every time Chip comes up with a new podcast, it comes directly to your listening device. For Chip Coughlin, I'm Matt Halloran. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Stratos Wealth Partners, a registered investment advisor. Stratos Wealth Partners and Retirement Income Analysts LLC are separate entities from LPL Financial. Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.